This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we turn to a follow-up on our exclusive broadcast yesterday, we spent the hour looking at a story out of Olympia, Washington, where anti-war activists exposed Army spying and infiltration of their groups, as well as intelligence gathering by the Air Force, the Federal Capitol Police, and the Coast Guard. Declassified documents obtained by the activists revealed that an active member of Students for a Democratic Society and Port Militarization Resistance in Washington State was actually an informant for the U.S. military. The man everyone knew as John Jacob was in fact John Towery, a member of the Force Protection Service at Fort Lewis. The infiltration appears to be in direct violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, preventing U.S. military deployment for domestic law enforcement, and may strengthen congressional demands for a full-scale investigation of U.S. intelligence activities, like the Church Committee hearings of the 70s. Well, Christopher Pyle was a captain in Army intelligence in 1970, when he first disclosed the military's widespread surveillance of civilian groups. The disclosure triggered 50 congressional inquiries within a month. Pyle went on to work for Senator Sam Ervin's Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights and Senator Frank Church's Select Committee on Intelligence that led to the founding of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Christopher Pyle joins us now from Chicopee, Massachusetts. He teaches constitutional law and civil liberties at Mount Holyoke College, and he's the author of 4 books. His most recent is called Getting Away with Torture. We welcome you to Democracy Now!
Good morning, Amy.
I wanted you to first start off by talking about the significance of these revelations yesterday, with the young activists on Democracy Now! Having simply applied under Freedom of Information Act for any information on anarchists or on their organizations in Olympia, Washington, and finding this one email inside that referred to this man named John Towery. They started doing some digging, and they realized it was their friend. Well, they knew him as John Jacob. He came out of Fort Lewis base. Christopher Pyle, the significance of this.
I think the significance is less that the Army is monitoring civilian political activity than that there is a network, a nationwide network of fusion centers, these state police intelligence units, these municipal police intelligence units, that bring together the services of the military, of police, and even private corporations to share information about alleged terrorist groups in cities throughout the country. I was fascinated by the story of the Air Force officer from New Jersey making an inquiry to the police in the state of Washington about this group. This is an enormous network. It's funded by the Homeland Security Department. Police departments get a great deal of money to set up these intelligence units, and they monitor largely lawful political activity in violation of the First Amendment, and when the military is involved, in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act.
I wanted to play just 2 clips from yesterday. This is one of the activists in Olympia who exposed that his friend John Jacob was actually John Towery, a military informant and a member of the Force Protection Service at Fort Lewis. I asked Brendan Maslakis-Dunn, the Olympia activist with Students for a Democratic Society and Port Militarization Resistance, what his first reaction was when he found out.
John Jacob was actually a close friend of mine, so this week has been pretty difficult for me. He said he was an anarchist. I met him over 2 years ago through community organizing and anti-war organizing I was involved with in Tacoma and Olympia with other anarchists and other activists. And he was really interested in Students for a Democratic Society. He wanted to start a chapter of Movement for a Democratic Society, which is connected to SDS. He got involved with Port Militarization Resistance, with Iraq Vets Against the War. He was, knew a lot of people involved with that organization. But he was a friend of mine. We hung out. We gave workshops together on grassroots direct democracy and anarchist struggle. I mean, he was a friend. A lot of people really did like him. He was a kind person. He was a generous person. So it was really just a shock for me this week when all of this was determined.
Brendan Maslowskis-Dunn went on to describe exactly what his so-called friend, John Towery, said when he confronted him with the evidence.
He admitted that, yes, he did in fact spy on us. He did in fact infiltrate us. He admitted that he did pass on information to an intelligence network, which, as you mentioned earlier, was composed of dozens of law enforcement agencies ranging from municipal to county to state to regional, and several federal agencies, including Immigration Customs Enforcement, Joint Terrorism Task Force, FBI, Homeland Security, the Army, and Fort Lewis. So he admitted to other things too. He admitted that the police had placed a camera, surveillance camera, across the street from a community center in Tacoma that anarchists ran called the Pitch Pipe Info Shop. He admitted that there were police that did put a camera up there to spy on anarchists, on activists going there. He also, one other thing he spoke of, I don't know if this is true, I mean, honestly, I don't know what to believe from John, but he said that the police in Tacoma and Olympia had been planning for a while on raiding the anarchist Pitch Pipe Info Shop, and also the house I lived in with several other activists in Olympia, and they had approached John several times saying, you know, do they have bombs and explosives and drugs and guns and things like that, which is just disgusting to even think that they would suggest that. They're just trying to silence us politically. They're going after us for our politics and for our work, you know, around port militarization resistance and around war, anti-war organizing. And of course, John told them, no, we didn't have any of those stuff. He told them the truth. But he also mentioned that there were other informants that are amongst us.
Brendan Maslowskis-Dunn, the Olympia activist with Students for a Democratic Society and Port Militarization Resistance, the one who put in the Freedom of Information Act request and found out his friend, who he thought was named John Jacob, was John Towery out of Fort Lewis base in Washington State. Christopher Pyle, you're now a professor. You were in military intelligence, a captain. When you started to uncover the military, almost 40 years ago, investigating civilian groups. Give us the history.
Well, I was teaching law at the U.S. Army Intelligence School, and I was asked to teach a class on CONUS intelligence and spot reports. CONUS is the acronym for Continental United States. So I delivered a lecture about the need for the use of the military to put down riots, which did not require identifying any persons. You simply go in, clear the streets, declare a curfew, quiet things down, restore order. And an officer came up to me after class and said, Captain Pyle, you don't know much about this, do you? And I said, no. And he said, well, I can arrange a briefing, and he did. He took me across the post to the headquarters of the U.S. Army Intelligence Command's CONUS Intelligence Section. There I discovered 13 teletype machines reporting on every demonstration around the country of 20 people or more. The reports were coming from 1,500 Army plainclothes agents working out of 300 offices. They had it all covered. They showed me a mug book of persons who could be rounded up in case of a civil disturbance. The military really believed that if you had a civil disturbance or a protest, it was very important to know the names of the people who might be protesting, because you never know, they might be connected with a cadre of agitators and communists behind them. Well, the same pattern is now developing under the U.S. Army's Northern Command, which coordinates domestic intelligence work for the U.S. Army and tries to prepare for what they call military assistance to civil authorities. It was out of this the Talon reports came that I also helped to disclose. Reports on lawful, constitutionally protected anti-war activities. And
who were some of the people in the mugshots, Christopher Pyle? Who did they say could be rounded up?
The first volume, under letter A, was Ralph David Abernathy, who was head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and a close associate of Dr. Martin Luther King. And there were many more of that type.
So you're saying
law-abiding citizens.
So you're saying some protest happens somewhere or a riot, and they